Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Buenos dias, damas y caballeros. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sung-Hoon Kim, and I'd like to invite you to the International Civil Aviation Organization's 40 Assembly SkyTalks. During the two-week period of this SkyTalks, we have 68 presentations for you, and I would welcome you to go onto YouTube and check the ICAO SkyTalks list for more details. At the end of the presentation, should you have any questions, I would invite you to step up to the mic up front here and fire away. Now, our first presentation of the day, this is day 4, session number 1. Mr. Thomas Mistos, Chief of the Oversight Support Unit here at the Air Navigation Bureau, will tell you a little bit more about the US OAP CMA online audit framework. Please, so without further ado, please welcome Thomas Mistos.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for taking the time early in the morning today to listen to the presentation on the online framework. And the first question I'd like to tackle is, what is the online framework and why is it useful? And I'm sure you've all heard of the USOAP CMA program. It's ICAO's audit and monitoring program. It's been around for 20 years. This is our 20th anniversary. And this year, we've made changes to the online framework, listening to all the users over the last 8 years that it's been online, and tried to make it more user-friendly, trying to give you the information you need and have been asking for. So the online framework is basically the nerve center of the USO program. States will use it to enter their information. ICAO will use it to see what the states are doing, right? And CMA, it's the CMA part of USOAP, so constant and continuous monitoring. But that's a little misnomer, because continuous monitoring is not continuous monitoring of ICAO towards the states. Continuous monitoring is also the states monitoring their own system. It's the states taking the pulse of their safety oversight system to see where they're at, where they might be lacking, where do they need to put resources. So I'd like to clarify this before we get any further, that the CMA part of USOAP, the continuous monitoring approach, it's not only ICAO monitoring the states, but it's the states monitoring themselves. So we're going to just take a brief look this morning on the online framework. We're going to see what it does, how can you access it. We're going to talk about filing of differences. EFOD is a module within the online framework, and it takes care of your Article 38 responsibilities under the Chicago Convention, which says that states must notify all other member states should they have any differences to standards and/or recommended practices in the annexes. And we'll again take a brief overview of the other modules within the online system. So what is OLF? How do I access it? Well, it's a web application. It's not something you need to install on your computer. You go on the web. It contains a myriad of interchangeable and interlaced modules with databases that allow the collection of information, right, both from ICAO and from the states, and of course the monitoring and reporting of that information. You can get on the online framework and get a report of every audit, every validation mission that ICAO has carried out over the last 20 years. They're all available over there. So how do we access it? Again, it's an online application. The address is on your screens, www.icao.int/USOAP. So if you remember USOAP, just go to the ICAO page, /USOAP. It will take you to the online framework. You will need a user ID and a password to access it. Please keep in mind that it is not part of ICAO's portal. So having a password and user ID for the portal does not give you access to the online framework. The online framework is run by your state. Access to it is granted by your state. So each state has nominated or appointed a national coordinator that we call the NCMC. We give the national coordinator access to the OLF, and from then on, it's the national coordinator and his or her assistants that decide who in their state can access the online framework and what type of access they can have. Whether it's read-only access, whether it's write access. Our USOAP audits are carried out in 8 different audit areas, so the national coordinator might decide that you would only need access in a couple of these areas. So again, how much access you have really depends on the national coordinator of your state. It's impossible for us here in ICAO to know within each state who should or should not access the system and what their duties within that state are. So we leave that up to you, to your state. If for some reason you don't know who the national coordinator of your state is, please just drop us a line at the USOAP inbox at icao.int, and we will be more than happy to send you the name and contact information of your national coordinator. Okay? Once you log in, this is just a brief view of the homepage of the OLF. You will see these colorful circles on the page. Each of these is an individual module that performs one of the functions. We will go through some of the key ones in more detail, and I will mention the other ones towards the end of the presentation. Another thing I would like to draw to your attention is on the left-hand side of the page, you will see a latest feed frame. When you do use the system, please pay attention to the latest news. Anything that has changed, any modifications to the system, any improvements to the system are listed over there. And it's the latest news that is always on top. So when you log in, I would recommend that you take a quick glance over there to see if anything has changed since the last time you were in. And if not, you're on your merry way. So what can you do in the OLF? Well, for the national coordinator, they can manage the user accounts of the system for their state. Right? We have something called the State Aviation Activity Questionnaire, the SAAQ, and within the USOAP auditing program, each state has signed an MOU with ICAO stating or agreeing to certain activities that they will carry out before we come in for an audit or a validation mission. One of these activities is to fill out this questionnaire, which gives us an outlook on the size of your organization, the activity within your state, as far as operators, as far as aerodromes, the number of inspectors in the various areas, who are the contacts in each area. And of course, as you can imagine, that information is important to us to have before we come to your state for an audit, because we need to know who do we contact for each area. We need to have an idea of the size of your aviation activity. So the SAAQ, or State Aviation Activity Questionnaire, is one of the things that you'll be filling out in the OLF. The OLF also contains a module called EFOD, or Electronic Filing of Differences, and that is what you'll be using to notify other states of any differences you might have with standards and or recommended practices of the annexes. Part of that MOU that you signed when you joined the USO program was a requirement to perform self-assessment. And this is an integral part of what we call CMA, or continuous monitoring approach. It is the state going in and basically auditing themselves. It's a fantastic tool for your state to get a picture of where you are at any given time. Don't forget, we cannot come there every year for an audit. We'll be coming there on a rotational basis. It's a risk-based approach. So we might not go to a state for 5 or 6 years. However, the continuous monitoring part of the program is the state is supposed to go in and on a regular basis do a self-assessment using the protocol questions that our auditors will use. And that is where we, as ICAO and other states, could go in and see how you're doing. And of course, it's a tool for you to see where you need to place resources, where you need activities to come up to the standards that is expected of your safety oversight system. After an audit, there will be findings. That I can guarantee you. There is no state in the system that is 100% perfect. So the question is, what then? Well, the next step is for you to develop corrective action plans to address the findings that were found during your audit. And again, through the online framework, you will enter your corrective action plans. We will see, we will assess the corrective action plans. You will then go into the process of implementing these corrective actions. And to close the loop, we will, when you're done, come and validate that what you did was in fact something that would close the finding. So again, all of this activity is carried on through the online framework. Okay. And we also have something called MIRs, and it's not the former Soviet space station. MIR in the USOP realm is a mandatory information request. There could be times where we feel that we need more information about a specific protocol question or domain. And at that point, we will reach out to the state, ask you to provide us that information so we can determine whether or not further action needs to be taken. And again, this will be carried out through the online framework. Okay, so let's look at the electronic filing of differences module. All right, so under Article 37, the states are mandated to notify all other member states of any differences they might have in the standards and or recommended practices. And this is, I would say, right now the easiest, most efficient way to do that. According to a council decision, this is an alternative means of notifying your differences. Please be aware that this is probably the best means of having all the states see those differences, because the states could come into the OLF and get an e-supplement, which replaces the old printed supplements that used to go into the annexes. And of course, the advantage of the e-supplement is the minute that you've put in your information, the minute you modify your information, it is active right there and then in the OLF. So whenever you go into the OLF to look at the e-supplement, you're always getting the latest picture of a state's handling of SARPs in the annexes. And from ICAO's perspective, We use that to see what the states are doing with the standards and recommended practices in our annexes. And we generate the e-supplement, which is the tool, as I mentioned previously, to notify the other states of your status. Okay. So some statistics, because everybody likes to see statistics. So far, we've got 186 member states that have reported some or all of their differences in EFOD, which means 7 states still to go. But this doesn't mean that all the annexes have been reported. For some states, they've handled 1 or 2 annexes. Others have handled all the annexes. And when I say all the annexes, it's all the annexes except Annex 17. Okay, Annex 17 is not part of the system as they have specific confidentiality requirements. So in here you will find all the annexes except Annex 17. If we take all the SARPs, and there's over 10,500 SARPs, if I recall, in all the annexes, about 71% of these SARPs have been reported on. So we're moving up. About 5 years ago, we were down to the 45 to 50% range. So states are becoming more active and more conscientious of notifying other states of their differences. And one of the reasons is the fact that they can now do it online. I would just briefly like to say, you see at the top of the slide it says CC EFOD. The CC stands for the compliance checklist. As part of the MOU that you signed for USOAP CMA, you were asked to fill out a compliance checklist. A compliance checklist at the time was necessary because states were not reporting their differences to ICAO. So as auditors, before we came to the state, we needed some vehicle to see how the state is treating their standards and recommended practices. So we came up with this compliance checklist, put it into the MOU, which the state signed. Therefore, they were bound to fill out the compliance checklist. At the end of this exercise, we realized the states have now notified all their differences by filling out their compliance checklist. So we combined the two together. To take care of the legal side, in order to say that this is not just a compliance checklist, but it's also my officially notified differences as a state, we have asked the state to use a button on the page that says validate, and it validates the whole annex. So for those who will go back to your home country and pass along this message, please make sure that you don't only fill in the information, but at the end of that, you also click the validate button to tell us that not only is this the compliance checklist, it's also our officially notified differences under Article 38. Okay? Again, going into the realm of statistics, just a quick overview. As of December of 2018, out of all the states that have reported on SARPs in EFOD, almost 49% of states have said no difference to, 48% of SARPs have been reported as no difference. The one that I would like to point out, and that's why I've got a narrow pointing to it, is the second line, 35% incomplete information. What does incomplete information mean? It means that a state has taken the trouble to fill in information about a particular standard or recommended practice, but they haven't completed all the required information. For instance, if you go in and tell me you have a difference with SARP 1.1.1 of Annex 1, that's not enough because you have to tell me what that difference is. Remember, notifying your differences to standards and or recommended practices to other states allows them to know what it is they need to do with your state that is different from what the annex specifies. If you say I have a difference, but you don't specify what that difference is, you're not giving me enough information. So, as you see here, about 35% of the SARPs that have been reported have incomplete information, which usually means a state has said we have a difference, but they haven't told us what that difference is. So please be careful when you do pass this message along in your state to complete all the necessary information in EFOD. So let's take a quick look at some of the modules. State dashboard will give you a range of graphs on numerous functionalities. You'll get graphs on the status of protocol questions, graphs on your progress in self-assessment, graphs on the corrective action plans that you have laid out, both from the ICAO perspective and the state perspective. You'll get before and after comparisons. What was it like before an audit or a validation? And what is it like after an audit or a validation? To give you an idea of where your state has moved. There's the SAAQ, as I mentioned previously, the questionnaire on aviation activity for your state. Self-assessment. Please make sure that you do this exercise on a regular basis. Now, regular basis does not mean once a week. It usually means about once a year or any time you know you have significant changes in the structure or functionality of your oversight system in your state. Provide implementation status, and mostly, please make sure when you do a self-assessment, you don't just say, we are satisfactory for this protocol question or not satisfactory, but you also provide the evidence. We have a facility where you can attach your documents to actually show us what you have done for this protocol question. And that again comes back to us in the continuous monitoring loop. In ICAO, we take a look at that to see where a state is without going to the state. But keep in mind that famous EI or effective implementation score does not change with your self-assessment. For that score to change, we must come on site and either do an audit or a validation mission. Okay? Corrective action plans as a state, you will submit a corrective action plan for every finding that was brought up during the audit. I will not go into the details of how to put together a corrective action plan because that is a whole course in and of itself. Please provide regular updates. We schedule our validation missions to states by the information we get in the OLF. We will look in the OLF to see how far a state has gotten into implementing the corrective actions. We're not going to set up a mission to your state if we do not see that a state has completed a big chunk of their corrective action plans on file. In other words, we're looking at 70 to 75%. Okay, so if you do have progress in your corrective actions, in your implementation of the corrective actions, make sure that you go onto the OLF and you update those corrective actions to show us the progress that you've made. Because that is the only way that we have of knowing how the state is doing. So it's in your best interest to make sure that your caps are being kept up to date. Okay? When you do your initial cap after a finding, ICAO will assess it to make sure that it addresses the finding, and we will let you know. And then we will monitor that cap in order to see your progress and to be able to schedule our next validation mission for your state. And lastly, just a quick overview on some of the other modules. The CMA Library, any information that is necessary to be able to function in the USOAP CMA realm is in the CMA Library, including the manuals, the documents, list of all the protocol questions, their references that allow you to basically act as an auditor for your state. We have a feedback module. Please, if you have any questions, comments, use the feedback module. You can send me a personal email, but if I'm on the road, I might not see it. Feedback module will make sure that whatever it is that you have a problem with or you have a question on will be dealt with as quickly as possible. There's a tutorial. I invite you to visit that. There's a module on USOAP reports, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. All the reports in the last 20 years of USOAP audits and validation missions are included in there for all states to see. And there is a module for the mandatory information request. And on that note, I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to any questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Good morning, and
Good morning.
Magnus Abram from Namibia, AIG. Thank you for a very informative topic. My question is, does ICAO provide user training on this online framework? And who do I contact, and how often, and where do you provide that?
Okay. We do have continuous workshops. We have 2 regional workshops every year. We go on a rotation basis to all the regional offices. This year we will be in the Asia Pacific and the mid office in Cairo. So we do 2 regional workshops every year, and if a state feels they need a workshop for themselves, then you can contact us at usopinbox@icao.int and give us your request, and we'll try to work out a time frame that is convenient both for the state and for our instructors. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wilson Sagari from Papua New Guinea. In some cases, just following on from the question from Namibia, other states and CMC conduct workshops on USOAP. Now, is that sanctioned by ICAO or not?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Other states, for example, New Zealand in the Pacific, conducts USOAP workshops for the smaller island states. I'm just asking whether that is sanctioned by ICAO?
It's not a matter of sanctioning. We're not. We don't own it per se. We have worked with some staff members of New Zealand CAA, such as Alistair Buckingham, I believe. And we're not always able to provide all the workshops that have been requested. So if there are other means of doing it, then we have no issues with that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's been some mixed reaction out of it. So the other questions, can you just give us an example of a mandatory information request?
Well, I could. We get information from various sources. We might hear that, for instance, a new operator has come online in a state that we know has a shortage of inspectors to carry out the 5-step AOC process. So we might want to go out to the state and ask them to give us the paperwork that was carried out for the certification of this operator to allow us to see whether the proper process and procedure was carried out. That's one example. So it's typically when we see whether it's from a mission that the regional office has conducted in your state, a non-USOAP mission, and they've seen something that they will let us know, or from other sources that we hear that we would need more information. That's it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tom, for those who have questions on this matter or anything else, please make sure to contact us at mcr@icao.int, and we'll refer you to the appropriate speaker or presenter. Thanks again, Tom.
Thank you.